This episode discusses miscarriage and loss of pregnancy. Listener discretion is advised.
We're all just kids. Like, I love it when people post things and they're like, we're the parents now, because I'm really considering taking my daughter to go see K-pop Demon Hunters in theaters this weekend, even though we've seen it 5 times at home.
I still haven't seen it, but I've been intrigued by the theatrical release.
I think it's James and Stevens, like
Yeah.
their Spotify is ruined because of it.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people's Spotify's are ruin's not the right term. Their Spotify algorithms have been made better and have been saved because of Huntrix.
Because they gotta be golden. Whoa.
Hey guys, welcome to Breakfast in Beauclair, a global Witcher podcast. My name is Alyssa from Good Morn, and I'll be your host as you, I, and our international Hansa accompany Geralt of Rivia and his destiny, Cyrilla of Sintra, across the continent. We are now 2 weeks since Andrzej Sapkowski's Crossroads of Ravens came out. I hope that you are all enjoying the novel. You can discuss the book in the Hansa Discord and also find questions our members ask Sapkowski on the Breakfast in Beauclair social media channels. I also want to take a moment, now that we're a couple of episodes into this season, to thank our editor, Caleb Buys. He's been doing such an amazing job on editing the discussions for this season, and I just really appreciate it. We are 10 days away from the close of the lengthy Tangent crowdfunding campaign. Outside of Breakfast in Beauclair, I also work on a number of audio fiction series as an actor, producer, and story developer. You can find our shows, Peculiar Radio, Theme Party the Podcast, and the new series, The Collection of Moira Graves, wherever you're listening to Breakfast in Beauclair. Support the campaign at Indiegogo. This episode, we welcome Sidna to our Hansa on Patreon. Thank you to our patrons and our producer-level patrons, Katie the Redhead of Toussaint, Jacob B., Charlotte from Hamburg Glamour the original Roach, Libby, John of Riblia, Tom from Australia, Jill Kate the Tabby Witch, Ollie from Sweden, James Carson III, Miriam of Temeria, Softy, and Lisa C. If you would like to learn more about supporting Breakfast in Beauclair, visit patreon.com/breakfastinbeauclair. As for this episode, Kitty from the US and Kyle R. from the US call in for Andrzej Sapkowski's Tower of Swallows, Chapter 3. Join us as we discuss raunchy Little Mermaid retellings, the framing narrative and half a century of poetry, Milva's grief following her miscarriage, Cahir's trustworthiness, and positive reinforcement over survival, quote, the waist is as low as we go, Gwent and the sprawling Nilfgaardian spy network, and Hannibal Lector, gynocologist. Without further ado, let's get to our discussion of Andrzej Sapkowski's Tower of Swallows, Chapter 3. Hey guys, welcome to Breakfast in Beauclair. My name is Alyssa, and today we're welcoming 2 members of our Hansa to the show. My first guest is a writer, editor, storyteller, and co-founder of the Icarus Writing Collective, where he publishes adaptations and retellings of mythologies that reflect the world and its people today. When he's not writing for work or pleasure, you'll find him dressing up as fictional characters with his friends, at a Renaissance fair, or most likely both. You'll recognize my second guest from episode 103, chapter 6, from Baptism of Fire, as well as the Hansa's Discord book discussions. She's a coach's wife and mom of 1 from Texas. When she isn't momming or working, she enjoys gaming, reading, or finding new places to eat. Please welcome Kyle R. from the US and Kitty from the US. Hi guys, how's it going?
Hi.
Hi, glad to be back. Thank you.
Yes, well, welcome back, Kitty. I'm excited to catch up with you and to talk about all things book club in the Hansa Discord. Before we do, Kyle, welcome to the show as a first-time guest. Would love to hear about how you got into The Witcher.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for letting me come on and get to talk. The way that I tell the story of how I got into The Witcher is I tend to say I got into it backwards. Like many people, I did fall into it show first. However, I only found out about the show about 2 or so years ago, mostly because with my cosplay, I discovered a great niche of folks in like the critical role in like Dungeons and Dragons space, and everyone was sharing their Spotify Unwrapped for that year. And every single person had this band on their top 5 that I had no idea what it was. And I finally reached out to someone. I'm like, hey, what's the amazing devil and why don't I know it when everyone else seems to?
Yeah.
So I found Joey Beatty's band through cosplay and got into his music first. As Spotify does its fantastical, maybe not anymore these days, algorithmic thinking, I was completely in love with all the music and playing it nonstop. And I was playing it in the shower, must have run out of all the album songs, and it
Mm,
started playing a song I had never heard before but could recognize it was the same vocalist,
yeah.
stopped my shower, pressed repeat, looked at the album cover, immediately went to my friends and went, "Can someone who's seen The Witcher please explain to me why Burn, Butcher, Burn is a breakup song?" And the rest is kind of history.
Yeah. Oh, amazing. I feel like you have fallen into like good company then, because, the Breakfast in Beauclair listenership is like very Critical Role, very D&D oriented, and quite a number of people also listen to Joey Beatty's music, but I actually haven't heard it. Like that is a really unique story of finding Joey Beatty first and then following his little paper trail of work.
Completely happenstance, completely happenstance. And then was like, oh, there's more music I can dig into. I
Mm.
actually sent the album Horror in the Wild to my husband, and he has played The Witcher 3, and he has tried to show
Ah,
me The Witcher 3 many times. But for whatever reason, in one ear, out the other, because he's told me since that every time he would try to talk to me about it, because it deals with mythology, it deals with
yeah.
like retelling like fairy tales in new ways, he'll always get to the part and there's a bard named Dandelion. And I go, that's kind of, you know. And he goes, yes, that's the point. And that's the only part I've ever remembered up until I'm like, hey, look at this guy. And he goes, oh, it's the guy from The Witcher. And I'm like, what's that?
You should marry that man.
Oh, I did marry that man.
Oh, that's so fun. What was it about either The Amazing Devil and The Witcher that like really stood out to you and like drew you in to the fandom?
I think originally with The Amazing Devil, it was just the way that the stories are interwoven through such methodical and very lyrical means, where
Mm,
you almost have to dive in a little deeper and try to figure out what is the metaphor here. Just really folk, acoustic emotionalness got to me. And I think Joey Beatty is a very, very talented singer songwriter. So
yeah.
having that as my anchor to get into The Witcher, obviously I recognize this man. I'm going to see this character. I'm going to see this bard, and I'm going to attach myself to this bard. Really, what got me in through with The Witcher is kind of exactly as my husband said. It's the little fairy tale references and the emotional part of this found family and the struggles that they're dealing with and how they find each other, how they break apart from each other. I really do like the show, and I went against my own personal belief that you should watch something before reading it. That way, you're not let down when the adaptation maybe doesn't go the way you want.
Yeah.
But even within Sapkowski's works, that same through line of all that interwoven really beautiful prose at some points with just how raw he can describe something and the way that he paints the story pretty direct, but also letting its characters and their flaws and struggles and actions drive it has always been something at the forefront that I appreciate within fiction.
Amazing. And on that note, what about the work that you've been doing with your writing collective? Could you tell us a little bit about how that started and some of the recent projects there?
Yeah, absolutely. The Icarus Writing Collective started as a post college project between me and the other co founder and editor in chief, Liz Zarb. We were friends and we wanted to really do something to mesh both of our loves. So I'm a big mythology guy. She loves classic literature. Her favorite is Frankenstein. It's hard to buy gifts from her because she has every single Frankenstein thing ever. But it really started as a way of like, how do we combine these two things into something that we can both find ourselves devoted to? We had actually met in a class where one of the projects was to focus on an adaptation or a retelling. And from that professor and finding our love in our craft as writers, wanted to just push ourselves to be editors and to create a space in print and online that would bring in storytellers from all around the world who also love these wonderful stories that can be rehashed out and retold in many different ways Something we love focusing on specifically is mostly a lot of LGBTQ retellings. It is a queer run magazine, and it's a lot of the ways that we like how stories of old can reflect the stories of now through the people that write them. So we published a Minotaur / Icarus story in our first issue, The Sun. Just recently in Monstrous, we had a Hercules and Hylas type of retelling. So it's been really interesting to see how people see themselves within mythology and how they want to bring their own stories to the forefront within fiction, because the best stories need realism, even if they are fantastical. And we're getting ready to start getting submissions for our fourth issue, which is all themed around the ocean.
Ooh.
So not just, Liz would be so mad at me. I keep saying ocean. It's anything to do with water. So give us your rivers, give us your bog bodies, your bayous, kelpies, and sirens. And so issue 4 Currents will actually be aiming to be published in November.
Well, I'm excited to check it out as well. Kyle, have you finished all the books?
I have not. I am halfway through Lady of the Lake, but I do know everything.
Following, I guess, like The Witcher 3 and all that stuff.
Yeah, when playing the game myself, I wanted to see, if that's in the future, how does it connect? So pretty well versed in the overall story mechanisms of how it all ends, and then how the, game adaptation continues. But I've not experienced it in full yet.
Okay. We will come back to this conversation. All right. And on that note, Kitty, how have things been going with you? What's been up? You have been absolutely crushing it in your book discussions with Softy in the Hansa Discord. And he talked a little bit about how that started on his last episode, but would love to hear a little bit more about it from your side as well.
Thank you. It's so crazy that, Softy and I consistently chat on a regular basis, and a friendship has developed between me and somebody on the other side of the world. And within the book clubs, it's been really great. We've had some consistent people come in. We've had some new people come in. We've had people that have just wanted to come in and listen, which is really great because we know that the world of The Witcher is so much bigger than just the books and the novels themselves. They really reflect on everything that's happening in real life. And they do such a good job of making you realize that, not everything is black and white and not everything has shiny bows on it. And so it's being able to have that conversation topic within the Hansa. We somehow still make it really fun and uplifting, though. I think about our last book club discussion. We talked about the similarities of Sirens of the Deep to A Little Sacrifice. And I think people have a great opportunity to really just express themselves and really continue their love for this Witcher. So thank you. I've really enjoyed the book club's hosting. And we're about to kick it into fall here in Texas. So that means Friday Night Lights. As my bio says, I'm a coach's wife. But I really love this outlet that you've given us because it allows me to kind of have a third part of life. You've got motherhood, career, and then this allows me to be myself. So I'm very excited. I'm grateful for it and grateful for Softy. I have usurped him as the word count, at least for now, but I bet he probably came back really strong in the previous chapter. So
that's good to know. To kind of bridge the gap between the work that Kyle does and I guess the most recent discussion you guys had about A Little Sacrifice. I think you shared that you and Softy have been making these massive spreadsheets, comparison spreadsheets for the short stories, the books, the shows, the films. You pulled in, I heard, Little Mermaid as well for this version. So I guess when you're looking at retellings and adaptations, what's one thing that came up during your most recent book club discussion that really surprised you or that you really enjoyed?
Yeah. Kyle, you hit the nail on the head when you talk about how Sapkowski has references to fairy tales and to previous stories. So in Sapkowski's telling of A Little Sacrifice, it's actually ironically supposed to kind of play off of The Little Mermaid, making fun of it in a little bit. Netflix's changes to Sirens of the Deep, they ironically made a rated R version of The Little Mermaid. Which
I'm so glad we're talking about this.
Sapkowski was making fun of in the first place. So we've just got a little circle of irony here.
I still haven't seen it.
Oh, Alyssa, it's actually great.
I feel like I need to wait until I have like a time scheduled to discuss it, to watch it. Are we coming up on maybe like a couple months to a year since Sirens of the Deep came out? I feel like it came out a while ago. I think I'm going to tack on Sirens of the Deep to the next Netflix podcast season. So I think in my head, I think I'm going to do all that together. But that also means I haven't watched it yet.
It even came down to physical similarities. And I'll post the grid because the grids are great when we post them. When we were doing our book club discussion, I had it pulled up and Bolo was like, wait a minute, and I was like, okay, I should have proofread. So I changed a couple of things. At one point, the evil witch who creates potions and sings about it at the same time. Not Ursula, not to be mistaken with Ursula. She disguises herself as a dark-haired woman, and she looks almost identical to the dark-haired woman from The Little Mermaid.
Vanessa?
It is the one who pretends to be in love with Eric. Is that I was not even aware. It is uncanny, and it is just. We'll post the picture. We'll post the grids. Yes, we do. We create these really nice because it's hard to compare sometimes with so much source material. I've played The Witcher 3 as well too, and so that is just candy when we can find book references. In fact, even my most recent playthrough, I went through and played a short part of it and did not recognize a character that was in the books that actually, spoiler, gets a not happy ending. And then I had a moment because I go, no, it's great how many tie-overs you can really get and how just great this world is and its fans too.
Oh man. Well, I'm excited to, eventually watch Sirens of the Deep and then come back to your comparison table for sure, as well as to your new water edition.
We have to have them hand in hand.
Yes. Today, we'll continue our discussion of Andrzej Sapkowski's Tower of Swallows with Chapter 3, in which Dandelion recounts the Hansa's journey after the Battle of the Bridge, and the group seeks the Druids of Cade-Du. Meanwhile, Nilfgaardian agents continue to pursue Ciri. Here's a quick synopsis of the chapter from future Alyssa. Chapter 3 frames its tale through Dandelion's future memoir, Half a Century of Poetry, recalling the company's flight from Queen Maeve's army after the Battle of the Bridge. Though the Northerners were victorious, the cost was heavy. Milva suffered a miscarriage, and Geralt was both knighted and conscripted for his valor. Each member of the company is wanted for one reason or another. Geralt by intelligence services on both sides of the war following Thanedd, Dandelion for espionage, Milva for aiding Scoia'tael, and Cahir as a wanted Nilfgaardian agent. And then there's Regis, the vampire. Unwilling to follow Maeve's army further, the group deserts, raiding supplies and stealing fresh horses and a mule named Dracul. Dandelion dreams of Yennefer. While in Skellige, Triss tries to track the sorceress only to be told that Yennefer had taken her own life. Meanwhile, in Nilfgaard, Emperor Mirvar Emrys berates the head of his intelligence services, Viscount Vadier de Redu, for failures to locate Ciri, Vilgefortz, or Cahir. In secret dealings, Rince offers Vadier Cahir's head in exchange for information on Tawny Owl, while Vadier's mistress, Cantarella, secretly passes his state secrets to the sorceress Asira Varanade. Geralt's meandering company later accepts hospitality from a beekeeper. The beekeeper's fellow villagers beg them for armed escort to the slopes, claiming that the displaced druids may be found there. Without a better direction, the company reluctantly joins them. All the while, Dandelion continues drafting his memoir. The chapter closes with a far future epilogue. Archaeologists in Beauclair discover medieval relics, including a scroll case bearing the emblem of Rivia. Disappointed to discover that the case only holds paper and not valuable treasure, thieves burn its contents. So now that we've gotten a synopsis of the chapter from future Alyssa, I would love to hear from you both about your overall thoughts, highlights, and lowlights for Chapter 3.
This is definitely a push the narrative forward kind of chapter. We're getting a lot of put together the pieces of, particularly with the Nilfgaardians, but we're seeing now the Hansa trying to move forward, trying to find a destination, and I really enjoy the back and forth between hearing it from different perspectives, including not just Dandelion's prose, but then third-person interactions between Geralt and Dandelion. I think that's really neat.
I really enjoyed the nested narrative approach of this chapter. Like Kitty said, it is like, okay, we have to get people moving. We have to keep the plot going. We can't have it be Baptism of Fire again, where they are just walking forever. So I think the approach of having it nested within Dandelion's memoir excerpts and then switching to, ironically or unironically, the next step that he then is writing about or referencing not only brings like a great amount of humor There's an excerpt where Dandelion is talking about Cahir, and then it cuts to Dandelion saying, like, I'm sure no one will ever remember Cahir in Nilfgaard. And then, no, people in Nilfgaard have not forgotten Cahir.
Yeah.
Amir and Batia have their conversation, and then back to Dandelion. Yeah, I'm almost certain that no one in Nilfgaard, even if he had a wife, would remember that he existed there. So I know that Andrzej Sapkowski really lives within a dramatic irony lens heavily in a lot of his novelizations. So having that here as well, and having the audience be moved kind of across the continent with all of the different movements of all these different groups as we continue for Siri and everyone else's specific drive is really interesting, having it centered around a memoir and having one person's perspective on the characters and the events, and then again bringing it back out.
Yeah. This isn't necessarily the first time that he's kind of moved forward and backward in time. Toward the end of Baptism of Fire, there was a chapter or two in which Geralt was reminiscing about everything that happened, and we kind of almost had a similar format over a much shorter period of time. But in this chapter, it's very much framed by like that memoir, which we can talk about in more detail. I think the interesting thing that I find about this, I think I like had a counterpoint, Kitty. I know you said like this is all about pushing the plot forward. I was like, I feel like this chapter is about almost like not doing that at all. And I think like it gets back to that end theme of like Regis being like progress without aim is still progress, even if you're not quite sure what you're doing. Because if you actually look at what happens, it's interesting because, like, we don't actually spend any time witnessing as readers parts of the story that I think we would normally see. If, like, any other writer wrote this chapter, they would have probably written out in full the Hansa's time with the Lyrian army. They would have written about the hemming and the hawing, about leaving, and then the act of desertion, and then, like, all this other stuff that has happened in between. And then Sapkowski basically takes all of those events and then condenses it into about 2 paragraphs, 3 paragraphs, most of which actually documents what they stole rather than what actually happened. And so he devotes a bunch of words to saying that they like stole paper, a bunch of horses, and a mule named Dracul. And then that's it. So like I find it very like fascinating because I do think it is very Sapkowski. And I hesitate to like think of any other writers who would opt for telling rather than showing in this way.
As soon as I said it, I go, actually, those dumb beekeepers were probably holding them back for a good chunk of it. And it's, like you said, the most nuanced things are laid out in chapters. And at one point, Gray in Discord told me about immersive listening. So where I actually had it audio and I was reading it. Because sometimes I'll be listening to audio and then I'll go, did I miss a wedding? Like when I'm listening to Witcher, because it just can happen like that. But then, like you said, he'll spend a paragraph talking about the descriptions of the items. So I think, like you said, in that part, it seems like rather than take 3 or 4 pages to discuss probably a couple weeks of events, deserting the army, running away, he does it in 3 paragraphs.
I think what's also really interesting as we focus in on that is with the show don't tell, we're not even being told like the omnipresent narrator's take on it. We're specifically being told what Dandelion perceives and what Dandelion feels about it. So, you know, the progress without aim is still progress, but it also kind of, while people are moving and people are driving and some, you know, it's chapter 3. So we are still getting like inciting incidents that will drive the rest of the book's plot. We still get moments of how the Hansa interacts and doesn't interact and how they feel about each other and how they respect or don't respect each other's space. Of course, through Dandelion's perspective.
Yeah.
So what I do like about the way that the chapter is told is we get some kind of ending. It's not a pretty happy ending, but it is an ending in a way.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing about the framing narrative is, of course, we like get Dandelion's lens 50 years into the future, realistically more like 30 to 40 years into the future, and then thinking back on all of this, which is an incredibly fascinating thing to like have that lens. And then we also have like a super deep cut, like into the far, far future, at a time where like skepticism about witchcraft is probably places it somewhere between maybe the 1700s to present-ish. In that small excerpt at the end of the chapter, we hear that like what we assume is Dandelion's writings is found and burned by thieves. So, yeah, I find it an incredibly fascinating and jarring, I think, thing to read, and a surprising way to almost self-contain the chapter. I've noticed on a reread that Sapkowski's very good at, like, every chapter almost feeling like a short story, even still, like 5, 6 books later. What did you guys think of that part?
I think a lot of the conversations I have with folks when specifically with just the bodies at the end of the chapter, because they're found in Toussaint, but they have the Rivian scroll case, that a lot of people, when I talk about it with my friends, is that they assume, oh, it was Dandelion and that's the writing we just read. I always like to challenge people a little bit on that because this isn't the first time in the series that we've seen half a century of poetry, because it's been almost introduced in the same way that other published, pieces within the continent have as like pre-chapter, uh, introductions. So I like to think that what we see Dandelion writing in throughout the chapter is like the draft, and that's what maybe has been found and then burned. But he then, of course, when you're a writer, you do so many iterations, so many drafts and edits. I can't imagine what it was like with a quill because it's hard enough on a laptop with Microsoft Word,
Yeah.
but it's not the only draft, I don't think. And then you have half a century of poetry published that we see in the chapter, and that might have been the real things, but like those raw, real, like in the moment where Cahir's like looking over his shoulder and it's like, it's not finished yet. What are you doing? I think that is what was lost. Like anything that had to have been changed for, as he recounts it years later, that original was kind of lost.
Mm.
Sapkowski really does a good job of making you pause the chapter and then sit back and just kind of stare for a few moments and be like, okay, well, I think I'm going to take a little break from that.
Yeah.
You mentioned a good point about the short story comparison. As we've been reviewing the short stories recently within the Discord Book Club, it is very clear that the short story manner that Sapkowski writes in, he thrives in. And so I think, like you said, when he can tie it in a neat little box like this, it does leave us sitting back and having feelings of unease. That's something I've noticed with a lot of these short stories is they don't have a pretty bow tied on top of them. They're meant to make you question, and they're meant to make you think what happened, what's going to happen next. And that's reality, right? That's exactly. And that was one of the chapters I had to close. For me, I took it very literally, where I'm like, that's Dandelion. That's his work. Everything that he's poured into has just been completely diminished within seconds. And it's also a curse to be witchcraft of all things. But it is exactly what the original professors wanted. It was a telling of events, real day-to-day events that happened that Geralt and Miss Hansa went through. So for me, I left with a lot of unease and a lot of just yearning to have that back.
Yeah, it does feel very like bittersweet. You spend this whole chapter becoming invested in the content of half a century of poetry. And then I think because it's a slightly ambiguous scene, you don't know if that's Dandelion. You don't know what version of that book that was eventually burned. I think I always have like the same kind of feeling, Kitty, where Sapkowski just kind of like splashes some cold water on you and he's like, oh, I know you were feeling good, but here, here's something to just like throw a wrench in that.
It's really rough nowadays thinking about things getting lost, modern sense with lost media and the political connotations of things being erased because people see it XYZ. What the Tower Swallows came out in the 90s, and yet again I'm like, wow, so ahead of its time.
Yeah.
It's uneasy, and maybe I'm a hopeless optimist. I'm happy to be a hopeless optimist. But seeing it in the perspective of it being burned, it kind of also made me think of Ciri and Falca, where just because it's like burned doesn't mean it has to be lost, or that power and that chaos, especially if it is still the continent, and maybe people have lost the ties to chaos, there is still magic, whether people choose to think of it as, something beautiful or something that is a curse. Maybe. We don't know much about this far, far future, but it's almost like a return to the flame and can be reborn. But that is the writer in me trying to deal with that unease because I don't want it to be gone or lost.
Yeah.
And that's the great part, is he leaves it for you to decide, right?
Yeah. This chapter is also just like, because there's not a lot that really happens like plot wise or like event wise, there's a lot of just funny stuff in it. Like the meal names are cool. There's a moment where Dandelion is complaining about the beekeepers and he's like, everything was sticky, even the women. And it feels like such a funny little thing. It feels like, of course, that would be a part of his memoir. But yeah, there were a couple of other things that were like very silly. I think also like Geralt once again being like, I need to venture out on my own. And the company is just so fucking sick of it at this point. They're just like, yeah, he like goes through this monthly.
They don't even take him seriously. They're just like,
No.
oh, Geralt, walk it off, limp it off.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm stuck on Limp It Off. The core of, I think, Baptism in the Fire and Tower of Swallows is that group interconnectivity, how no one seems to really think they know a lot about each other, but they're
Yeah.
very clearly well aware of everyone's mood swings and their, very specifics. It's like, oh, just Geralt. And I think one of my favorite moments, I dog-eared it down because I'm a bad person and I take bad care of my books, is the moment where after Dandelion writes about the dream he had, we then see how that plays in live time. It's just 2 words. You might even miss it if you're reading very quickly at the bottom of the page because that's it. That's the scene. It's like, oh, Dandelion was falling asleep in the saddle. And he's like, no, I was thinking creatively.
Yeah.
Again, those funny, silly moments where they can call each other out. And then what is their response in this like ragtag group?
I love it when they all kind of appreciate ragging on each other, but within limitations, when Milva just really gets at Dandelion and you're like, okay, that was a little harsh. And the whole council agrees. They're like, you exaggerated a little too much though, but you're kind of right. It's a great little like brother sister dynamic of, you need to take it back. We can all throw punches at him, but that one was a little too hard. And it's like you said, it just completely, it's not plot forward, but it's character forward.
Yeah, the one thing I forgot. So the mule named Dracul, the sticky women, and then when the beekeeper emerges from the forest and everybody freaks out and the person that starts screaming about a werewolf is a vampire, I'm like, incredible, impeccable, no notes.
They're a funny group.
They are. And that's what makes it like so enjoyable, I think, as readers. Even if nothing happens, we still enjoy the ride. And like I think that is the beauty of a lot of Sapkowski's work, for sure. As we continue on with our discussion, we'll move on to the next question. So at the end of Baptism of Fire, when the group is going through the Battle of the Bridge, Milva has a miscarriage. And in this chapter, we hear from Dandelion that she processes this event through silence, isolation, and then finally the symbolic act of cutting off her braid. What does this reveal about her coping and healing following this event? And I think, Kitty, did you want to start? I know that you had a few thoughts on this.
It's crazy. It's been 5 weeks since, as Sapkowski calls it, an unfortunate misadventure, personally. So, Alyssa, this happened after I signed up for the chapter.
Oh, really?
And,
okay.
Yeah. So it was a very, sometimes the timing of things just makes you double guess. And if I've gone around it too much, I personally experienced a miscarriage about 5 weeks ago. And God bless the Hansa. And that was really Texan, my apologies. But the Hansa is, as you broke down the chapter and we're going through things, it was Softy that alerted me to the nature of this chapter, which he was the only person I had told, actually, in the Hansa that we were actually expecting. So it was you've done it. You've created the friendships that we'll have forever. So with Milva going through what she went through, I think loss of control is absolutely the theme, where she was put in a situation she had no control of. And I understand that exactly. And so when you go through something that, fit Milva, who's never had an issue with her body, she's always been able to run, jump, be free. She's been experiencing a huge body change, of course, with pregnancy. And then all within a very sudden period, you have a shift. You're no longer pregnant. Your body shifts back to what it previously thinks, but it's still hanging on to previous chemicals. So she is going through a just complete shift, right? 180, and your hormones are going back. And Sapkowski doesn't even dive into that, but he does dive into how she handles it.
Mm-hmm.
It's textbook. You get silent, you get reserved, and as crazy as it is, you cut your own hair. These bangs are a result of like 2 weeks later, just being like, I have to change something. Something changed to me that I had no control of, and I need to change something. And as soon as I cut my hair, I went and messaged Softy and I go, I just pulled a Milva. I think that's where I'll lay off on that one, because I think loss of control is probably the biggest I can take from it, and understanding that point of view. So thank you for allowing me to share too.
Yeah, and I appreciate you being open and willing to share that experience as well. You had messaged me, obviously, before we recorded, just to let me know that it was something that you were interested in broaching on the podcast. And I think part of the joy, I think, of having people with such different perspectives on the show is being able to listen and to... I know this sounds, I'll take the whole space in the Cynthia Erivo way for these conversations. And so, of course, I really appreciate you sharing that experience, because even though Sapkowski can and did write a character that has gone through a miscarriage, I'm pretty confident he hasn't necessarily experienced that biologically himself. So it is like a valuable space, I think, for you to share that. And I do appreciate you bringing that here as well.
Yeah. In a literary perspective, during the episode itself, I had no reference points, because you don't have that expectation that you're going to have a miscarriage. So you're not prepared. And so I didn't have any resources. And really, I just thought, the only time I think this is probably the first time I've ever seen it written. So that just, again, leaps and bounds where Sapkowski was in writing, because even nowadays, it's not a subject that's written about. It's something very hush-hush. So if anybody is in the Discord or Hansa that needs to open up and talk about it, I just wanted to let you know that I am always happy to be a listening ear and always happy to listen.
Yeah. Is there anything you might want listeners of the podcast to know or understand about the experience of going through a miscarriage?
I think the more we talk about it, the more it's normalized. And it's a very hard thing to talk and discuss. But the more we discuss it, the more we normalize it, it helps us to move past it. And, earlier in my bio, I don't know if you heard me slip up, I said mom of two. And understanding the brain chemistry that just changes so much. And again, just you never really know what somebody's going through. And I think the Hansa does a great job of accepting Milva as she is and just letting her have her experiences. And there's even a point where Regis says Milva will require post-care, which is very true. There's about 2 weeks of post-care that happens afterward that no one really knows unless you're going through it. So it's as somebody who I like to think I'm pretty tough in some ways, it was definitely more of an experience than I was prepared to give myself emotional grace for. So I've given myself a lot of grace. Again, I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak on it. And I think, again, just nobody's going to deal with it the right way. I think just being open and accepting and really just being like Geralt and Regis and just letting you go through the punches.
Well, thank you for sharing. Of course, I feel like I'm tearing up now.
I hadn't, it was, I was 12 weeks.
Oh, okay.
And so that's, I still just can't get over that. The way I remembered that this chapter had the content was because it was Softy reached out. So I think that's one of your biggest highlights, Alyssa, is Softy and I were already creating a relationship where he was aware of it. Because I was trying to get back on book club. It had just happened. And so I was just off. I wasn't on, going through Milva's symptoms. And so he just kept reaching out, everything okay? And that's when I just told him, because he was already aware that I was expecting. So The Witcher brings out the best in people, I think. And even though there are terrible situations, we can always see how they're going to rise above and continuing just being kind to each other in spite of dark things happening. Is there anything else that I can answer for you? Because I know this is a big one. So.
No, I was going to open up to Kyle if there's anything else you wanted to add or ask.
There's nothing that I can really add on the topic, even as a trans man, with the same inner workings, but very different expectation now socially. And, kind of, I've cut my own braid, but I've had that symbolic of like, you've changed and you've gone through something, and how will you evolve coming after? But with Milva specifically, I think Sapkowski makes the choice that we'll read about it through Dandelion's memoir and the way that Dandelion reads it. I don't know the guy, but it's I am a man, I've not experienced this. Here's a man writing who has also not experienced this, but can have that empathetic view, as we all have, as we take care of our own. Its representation is the utmost important. And hearing your story, Kitty, and the timeline of this events, thank you for sharing. Thank you for, trusting this group of folks, and, what you've built, Alyssa, is beautiful. And it's why writing about these things that society deems as hush hush are really, really important.
I really want to pause and billboard that observation, Kyle. Yes, he is not a man who has experienced miscarriage personally. And he uses the literary device of also using a man to reflect on this event that he hasn't experienced. And I think that's a very clever approach. And I really appreciate you calling that out. And the observation of it is fantastic.
Softy also wanted to let me know that cutting off the braid is a plot point. So we won't get too spoilery, but the braid cutting is recognized by a spy later on. Although Sapkowski uses this physical transformation to show what Milva's going through, he also uses it as a plot point too. And I thought that was, he continues to care about these characters and how they're going to continue to affect. Also, in the scheme of looking for the hair scene, because I wanted to be specific on exactly where it was, he didn't say hair, he says plait. So, indicating the braid. She's also the only female character in the entire chapter that he does not discuss the hair color, even though he discusses Yennefer's dark hair. So it's not that it's a familiarity. But I don't know. Sapkowski does everything for a reason. So I just thought that was kind of like his way of saying, Milva needs peace. I'm not going to focus on her hair color. I'm going to focus on what she's going through. And it gave me some, that's a nice extra care. I think that's exactly what she needed and got somehow through the writer as well.
Yeah. So as we continue on with chapter 3, Geralt still doubts Cahir's loyalty despite his actions over the last few books. Do you think Cahir is more or less trustworthy given that he's deserted from both armies? And is Geralt justified in his suspicion, or does it reveal his own inability to forgive?
I think Geralt's reaction to Cahir continuously is, in one hand, he's a girl dad, and this guy did kind of ruin her entire life.
Personally ruined, yeah.
Personally ruined. But on the other side, I think where the story beats are now is that we don't see Geralt as this witcher who is completely untouchable or untouched by emotion, but rather ruled by his emotions, even the more negative ones. So I think the justification in the suspicion is valid, although with the rest of the crew, they've all specifically have done an action to show that they're on Geralt's side. So Regis and his tracking skills and being able to navigate and get them through. Milva specifically, when he was in, here we go, I can't pronounce things. I sometimes say Brooklyn, and I know it's not Brooklyn, Brooklyn. And then Dandelion's been there forever, and he can't get rid of him. But with Cahir specifically being, I think, a little secretive with how he tracked down the group to follow them without kind of being overt of I do want to help. You can never justify emotions. Yeah. And the way of his protected nature over Ciri, I think he might see Cahir as a means to an end, where it's if he can get us information about Nilfgaard, if he can get us into Nilfgaard to get to Ciri quicker, I don't think Geralt's a stranger to using people for what they can do to better his own kind of advance and means. But it sucks because Cahir's a great character, and if he just had a hug or they fought it out with their own swords, it would be a lot better for both of them.
Yeah.
Cahir's never really felt like he truly belonged in Nilfgaard. I don't feel like he always consistently pulls himself a guard, the Nilfgaardian who's not a Nilfgaardian, he's a Victorian. I always like anytime they go into talking about Cahir, they usually mention his full family name or they talk about his legacy. We hear about Cahir Dandelion's perspective, and then we hear about it again from The Witcher in a 3-point view, just watching the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that because it gives us kind of both insights, and even Dandelion's confused. Like, well, give this guy a break. He's done enough for us already. Has he not proven his loyalty for you? And I think what really sets Geralt off is the scar that Cahir has, because scars are so big in the Witcher universe that I feel like that physical reminder for him is just like, for Geralt, a lot of things just come down to physicality. And just seeing the scar, he's like, I look at you and I see a reminder of what Ciri had to do to protect herself.
I feel like it's an interesting question just because, like, I think Cahir's desertion for both armies, I think it's, again, that dramatic irony where, like, I as a reader feel like he's trustworthy because since desertion, he has nothing left to lose and he seems to be helping for now. And it doesn't seem like he really wants to, like, curry favor with the Emperor or, like, anything else. However, I think Geralt is kind of rehashing this, like, trauma every time he looks at Cahir, and I feel like, consciously or not, he blames Cahir for losing Ciri at Thanedd. Yes, because Ciri fought him and he fought Cahir, but I think more specifically because he let Cahir go, right? Which is what he recounts to Dandelion. And he just kind of goes through this whole thing of just like, I should have been capable of vengeance. And then I think part of him, he chose not to kill Cahir so that he could go pursue Ciri and still lost her in the end. So I wonder if it's more about like his own personal regret and like feelings of failure than it is about Cahir himself.
Absolutely just does Cahir a disservice because he doesn't really belong anywhere, and he has this opportunity to fit in with this group of people that don't really belong anywhere now.
Yeah.
And Geralt just won't give him a break.
It feels almost like Avatar: The Last Airbender, like when everybody gets like little day trips with Zuko, except for Toph, or is it Toph, I think, that doesn't get one? She also complains about that. She's like, why does everyone else get like a trip with Zuko except for me? And I feel like, you know, at this point in the story, Geralt and Cahir have had a few, but it feels like there needs to be some sort of real, like the Battle of the Bridge for whatever reason wasn't enough. Therefore, something else has to really happen to build the trust between the two of them.
Something maybe outside of a large group of people surviving for their life.
Yes, yeah.
They need a one-on-one bonding opportunity.
Yeah, positive reinforcement, not just survival.
Yeah.
I was just trying to double check where this point is with the chapter, and the point I could remember was where Geralt goes, then to hell with you.
Yeah.
He's like, you know what? I'm not going to justify if I don't like here because he hurt Ciri. I don't need to continue justifying that to you.
Mm-hmm.
And that is kind of like a parent thing where recently, again, it's funny, the similarities and parallels where sometimes parents, it's like, but you lose a little bit of your common sense when it does come to your child.
Mm-hmm.
For example, here in the state of Texas, they just got rid of cell phones in classrooms. And Olivia is not in school yet. She's only 3, but I've seen my peers who are like, yeah, it's weird. I can't text my kid anymore. And I go, you were texting your child during their classroom time? But it's that parent glaze of like, this is okay, this is fine.
Because it's me and my kid.
Exactly. So Geralt is just really, like you said, he's just girl dad.
Yeah. And as we move on, Dandelion dreams of Yennefer's escape, while Triss is told Yennefer has taken her own life in Skellige. How do these fragmented perspectives throughout the chapter affect the reader and deepen the mystery around Yennefer's fate? We talked a little bit about this, like in the opening, with how Dandelion's narrative is interspersed with little vignettes almost around the continent.
I think for me, this is, and Triss's arc begins. Because we saw Thanedd, but we didn't get to see her like in any heroic actions at Thanedd. And now we're getting to see she's going to kind of come full circle.
I think it is like an open question of like, who is she getting this information for? And for what purpose? As readers, we're like attuned to Triss because her involvement with Ciri and like Blood of Elves, gamers especially, fawn over Triss. I think she is her most Triss self here, trying to hide, doing a bad job of it, and becoming fixated on the fact that this fishwife's arm is just smaller than her 22-inch waist, which is just every time.
That comparison of Trista's waist size carries you throughout. I think Sapkowski loves art. I think he's an art person, and he doesn't get the chance to talk about the scenery and everything, so he just puts it in the form of women.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of breasting boobily in this book series.
There's a lot of bosom stuff. He's
Yeah.
definitely a bosom guy, but it's an appreciation of the form, I hope.
I don't have a conscious recognition of him ever mentioning a butt once, actually. No, I can't think of an example.
The waist is as low as we go.
Yeah. Maybe a belly button if we're lucky. Yeah.
Again, just taking a step back and looking at the role of the chapter within the narrative, like it is exactly like activate sleeper agent Triss
Mhm.
and continue on your journey and let this kind of be that spark and the building of mystery around Yennefer, because there's a lot of things that are never quite clear until they're happening right in the moment. And you're like, oh, that's what that one reference in chapter 1 was about. Thank you very much. Yennefer is such a crucial tie. You know, we know what's happening with Ciri. We know where Geralt is, but we don't know where Yen is. With everything else playing with dramatic irony that the readers can be aware of, having the uncertainty and the no clear facts on who to believe or what to believe, or do we trust a dream or this little vignette, almost will let the payoff when that comes be satisfying, not satisfying. Everyone will have like their own moment, but it's like readers can't have everything.
Mhm.
And while we get so much, it's like, here's the important thing that I'm going to dangle in front of you like a carrot on a stick. And you won't reach it until I let you reach it.
Yeah.
I love the subtle references he does in this chapter to Kelpie is used, which I had never put that together. That Yennefer's dark hair makes her has a Kelpie like a parent's, which is beautiful. I didn't really spoil that, but I love that Kelpie reference there. We know that Skellige takes a lot of influence from Nordic. It's beautiful to just see him take those times to discuss the people, what they're like. I really enjoyed that portion as well too. And then that subtle hint about Yennefer's character, the fact that the fisherwoman, she speaks to Yennefer's character as, you know, we weren't the nicest to her. I really appreciate that mention, because we're going to just continue to see what happens. And then that's all we get of Yennefer's time in Skellige, at least for right now. So, like you said, this is one of your little inklings that you'll have to figure out what happens at Cairtrolda later on.
Yeah, and it's very quick. I don't think we really heard much about Yennefer if we did, it would have been in chapter 1 and like that dream sequence thing, but I'm not sure if we did. The last time was the traveling storyteller at the end of Baptism of Fire is like, Yennefer was up to some shit. And like, that's kind of something that we get. Again, his writing is so efficient that we hear that she made it to Skellige after leaving Bald Mountain. She was eventually brought to Crocon Crate, who was displeased to see her, and then continued to serve on her. And then at some point, she apparently died. And that's just about it. It is like a lot in a very short period of time.
With a book all about perspectives, and this chapter with perspectives, it's, can you trust the fisherwoman? Is she saying, it's like a game of telephone. How far does this go, and kind of what's changed as it goes along? That's what you get to pick through and try to figure out.
Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, we will have to wait, I think, for any additional information about Yennefer as we continue our discussion. Between Emir's frustration with Vadier, Rince's double dealing, and Cantarello's work as a spy, what picture does Sapkowski paint of Nilfgaard's political circle? Are they ruthless? Are they incompetent? Or is this network simply too big to control at this point?
No one is who you think they are.
Mm.
And it's funny, as I'm reading the chapter, thinking there's a reason the Nilfgaard deck does have a lot of spies in the Wild Hunt.
I've loved a Nilfgaard spy deck. Loved it.
Gwent comes out like in a week, and
Yeah.
I can't wait to get my hands on it.
Where are you going to put that monstrosity? That's been the joke of the Discord group. Where does it go? It doesn't fit on IKEA shelves. We've already tried.
Yeah, I have so many unopened Witcher boxes from all of the like go on board campaigns. Charlie and I, every time we get an email, we're just like, we can't do this anymore. I think we got to timeshare like our our Witcher boxes and just like ship them around the world at this point.
The Hansa of the traveling board games.
Yes.
My goal with it specifically is to just put the box in my closet, but I was just gonna build out my own decks and then keep them with me, and then maybe make Gwent cards of my cosplays and give
Oh,
that to
that's
people
cute.
when they beat me, because I will not win. And it can be like a little reference to the game where every time Geralt, goes up to a shopkeeper, beats them, they give him a card. And it's like, here's my card.
Oh, that's cute.
But no, with the Nilfgaardian spies, it says a lot about the type of people they are. They're very ambitious. They don't trust anyone but themselves, and will do whatever that takes or wear whatever hat they need to. I loved Cantarella's bit
Mm-hmm.
because you're reading, it's like, oh, she doesn't talk, and like maybe it's we are told that she could be simple-minded, but no, no woman in the Witcher series is simple-minded. Always coming after her own gain. And it is a real beautiful moment because it also showcases that even in like a safe environment, literally with his pants down, can still not be safe because of who might be listening. I think it reads more about the history with the usurper and then Emir coming in. It's so tumultuous that they don't really get space to breathe and feel stable because they've never really had a stable environment. So they themselves are, as people, as spies, as political figures, constantly need to have a plan B in their back pocket. Again, like the history to the people, to how it affects the story.
I almost had another point where like there's no active war in Nilfgaard right now. So it's almost like this spy network has the luxury in some way of just continuing to like bicker with each other because they are so removed from the everyday war that the Northerners are experiencing and that Geralt's company is experiencing. And it's all about political intrigue. And at some point, it is just seeing a very sad Severance-esque office drama where you have Vadier, who's a Viscount, getting reamed out by his boss. And he's like, I feel like I just can't go home yet. I'm just going to go hang out with my mistress. and then, but even on the way to do that, he gets intercepted by his other secret boss and then gets yelled at some more. And then he goes to his mistress and then turns out she's a spy.
It's a comedy of errors,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't necessarily think that it's about incompetence, but I do think that it could be being too big to actually like control and manage because everybody has their own like incentive and goals. And like you get a little bit of like, there's this huge question that comes up where Renz is like, I'll give you Cahir's head if you tell me what Tawny Owl's up to. And then Vadier was like, yeah, I told him what Tawny Owl's up to because Tawny Owl's just like killing off bandits in Gesso and like hired some assassin. What is it to me? And then obviously that's Ciri's whole arc, which we covered in chapter 2. That is incredibly traumatic for her. But to this spy, like this spy master who's so removed in the Nilfgaardian capital, like it sounds like Tawny Owl's just like having a really stupid time of it. It's an interesting kind of perspective to receive.
And we like that it's Asire, the one receiving the information from Cantarella. Asire is related to Cahir. So we know that she's going to take this information in order to be able to help. So it's, again, remembering those details. They had the meeting and it was just them two. That was the one that I think that Philippa decided to unearth Yennefer. What is that process? I forgot what that process is called.
Unpacking. Francesca unpacks Yennefer. Yeah.
Yes. And they're talking about Cahir here and before in that previous chapter. So it's good to see that continuance of what's going to happen, how connected Cahir is, and everybody is obsessed with him. Like you said, no, he's not going to get forgotten at all.
Yeah, and I think because she's a part of the Lodge of Sorceresses and an active, from what we understand, loyal member of the Lodge, all this shit that, all the secret shit that's happening in Nilfgaard, she's going to bring right back to Philippa, presumably. Like, I don't know to what extent she might be loyal to Cahir, even as family, but I do think it's like an interesting thing, like how her personal experience can like play into like her political actions as well.
Amir is focusing on finding Siri, and everybody else is still kind of like, why is this girl so important to him? You can just marry somebody fake. It's not that big of a deal. So there's the distrust of Emir that's seeping through, and how everybody's just trying to, okay, let's just figure out where this Siri person is and try to keep Emir happy. I had a note on here that they're both trying to make sure the relationship between Beagleforts and Emir is repaired, which that seems crazy to me. I'm like, how on earth are you going to try to reverse back what Beagleforts has done? Our favorite Hannibal Lector gynecologist. But that to me, like, I was like, how are they going to try to fix that? And like you said, if you get Cahir, we'll get here, we'll go here. And again, we get to learn Carthia's hair color, which is blonde. Again, nice description.
Bringing it back to the office comedy of it, you got to do whatever it takes to just make the big boss happy, even if you don't like it. If the CEO wants X done, but you don't agree with it, you might still go off and do your own, maybe against contract dealings, but you're still in your day-to-day, knowing if you're in the office, you have to make that environment a little livable. So, okay, fine, we'll do what you want, but also I have my own ideas of how to take this, and I'll start a startup on the side.
Yeah, I know. There's arguably too many sub-startups and subcontractors operating under Nilfgaard at the moment. And yeah, I think especially when you're dealing with a boss who is just seemingly unhinged and, again, seemingly focused on the wrong things, that can be very, frustrating. So it feels like it's unsurprising to see kind of like where this has ended up when it's adapted for modern times. And so the last question that I want to ask before we get to the end of our discussion, over the course of the chapter, nothing necessarily happens, but by the end of it, the company has found themselves in the care of a beekeeper and his family. At the end, when the Riverdale villagers beg the company for protection on their way to the slopes, Geralt's group reluctantly agrees. Do you guys think that the beekeeper was right to deceive Geralt about where the druids of K2 may have gone in order to secure protection? Or is this manipulation unjustifiable?
I feel for the beekeeper. He's got one job. He's trying to protect all of his little beekeeper family. And, I Googled beekeepers don't look the same now that they did in this time period and era.
Also, this one looks like a bear, apparently. Or a werewolf.
Very sticky bear.
Even more unusual. And so it's very visual. It's almost humorous. Like, it reminds me of like Smokey the Bear trying to ask firefighters for help. Be like, just like, let me climb on your ladder. I don't know. I'm trying to figure out the cartoonishness of it almost. Because I imagine when they're having these conversations, they're having that big beekeeper mask on from that time period, that like wicker. And they even talked about it, the Wicker Man effect in there too. I put a lot of imagery in my head of these people being like cartoonish and just being like, well, if you're moving forward, technically you're making progress, right? Which, as we know, Regis eloquently puts it later.
There's a lot within the novels that does a really good job of, it's a fantastical tale, and we're dealing with kings, and we're dealing with war, and we're dealing with princesses, but there's still time for the little people. They're a small family in a small village that focuses on very few like specific trades, and we get to see how everything around the continent is affecting them. So I think he's completely justified. Like, it sucks from like the Hansa's perspective because they just want XYZ, but it's not a video game. You can't bully an NPC into giving you exactly what you want. And it's a testament to Sapkowski's writing in the sense of like, everyone has their own agenda.
Yeah.
And we still see that brought down, even just connecting our previous conversation with the Nilfgaardian spies to a little beekeeper family in Riverdale. You have people with swords that can absolutely protect you. Do what you need to do to protect your people. I support it.
Yeah.
The beauty in it too is that even though you're like, okay, they finally decide we'll carry these 42 people, which is described as 10, 10, and then half, and that was the math there. But it's 42 people. Then they describe how it was great, though. They traveled 15 miles each day, which was more than they were traveling by themselves, and they ate plenty.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like when you do a quest I'm playing Breath of the Wild right now. So it's one of those games where you do something and it's so minuscule and it takes forever, but then the payoff is huge. Exactly, kind of almost like a video game. So even though they made a decision that might have been a poor one at the time, they thought it actually ended up paying off, which is a really sweet way to say, like, sometimes helping out your fellow man is the best choice.
I find it hard to justify like flat out lying, even if they are being like optimistic. It's like a partially educated guess that they could maybe be there. Obviously, again, like the company's very upset. And I think Cahir one the first to be like, it seems wildly convenient that you think the druids have gone to the exact place that you want to go. And then, the beekeeper just absolutely caves. As you said, Kitty, I think like it is ultimately a good thing, and Dandelion tells us as much. He's just like, okay, after like a day or two, like Geralt was very happy with the pace of the journey, and then ultimately, as to Regis's point, they have no idea where the fuck they're going. Again, like I understand why Geralt is frustrated, because there's nothing that he can point his sword at and run through, so he just kind of has to go along with it for the moment.
Beekeeper and Geralt are both girl dads.
They're both protecting their
Yeah.
baby girls, and that's the clash. It's each of their agendas to protect their family is against one another. So like you're right, you can't justify lying, but talk about like the guts.
I
You
know.
see that you see this like soldier people and Geralt and Cahir mainly, and
Yeah.
you're like, no, we'll lie to them. This
Yeah,
will go great. And it worked out for them too.
it's a very bold sort of bet. Yeah.
Yeah.
It ends up being one of the more fulfilling side quests, actually.
If it went poorly, like, ooh, that would have gone really, really bad. Again, admire where Sapkowski takes it, I think, by the end. And yeah, what an ending it is. I think both for the chapter as well as for our discussion. So, Kyle and Kitty, any final thoughts on chapter 3 of Tower of Swallows?
I just had a couple of random notes. I think when they go so into about Dandelion's 50 years of poetry,
Yeah.
it makes me think, it actually made me think of Volo's Guide to Monsters.
Oh my God, yeah.
Right. I couldn't timeline if D&D had already started. I think D&D wasn't until the 80s, so it wasn't. This is just a very fun, like, predicting the future, maybe. Again, I'm not sure on my timeline's there, but now it makes me feel bad anytime I get rid of a manuscript in a video game. And I'm like, but I can sell it for $1 or whatever currency. But I'll keep it in mind now. Maybe I'll keep the Bard's notes.
Yeah.
It's kind of like in Elder Scrolls. Like you pick one item to hoard, whether that's the stories that you find or cheese. For me, it's always the wheels of cheese scattered throughout. I really like chapter 3 because I don't believe we get another sort of chapter even later on in the books that do this dual narrative of here's the story and then you're seeing it played out. And I like that Sapkowski isn't afraid of those risks. An editor today would look at this and be like, no, we can't do it. As an editor, I'd be like, we can try, but also like people will get confused. Authors nowadays are coddled and they shouldn't be because they don't take risks. But with the bringing in random new characters, changing timelines, it is something that makes it so unique and such a pleasure to read that is so unlike anything else. So I like this chapter particularly because it's really one of his strong suits of taking a risk, making a new narrative perspective, and it pays off great for the reader's interest and for the rest of the story.
This book in general is longer than the others that we've had. So, Tower of Swallows is 11 chapters compared to Baptism of Fire's 7. And we spent chapter 1 introducing Ciri and Visigoda, chapter 2 introducing what happened to Ciri most immediately following Thanedd and joining the rats. And then we get, again, another kind of inciting event chapter with Geralt and the company. So it just feels like we've kind of encountered, like, it's like a Blaveris times 3. But it does feel appropriate, I think, especially because we have so many narratives that we're following at this point in the books. And it's a very easy way to kind of like get back into what the company is doing. Where, yeah, there's not a lot of plot set pieces that happen. Like when you think about the company spending 2 chapters escaping the Cintran army in like Baptism of Fire. It's very efficient. We hear about things very quickly because Dandelion is telling his memoir, but it's a very easy way for us to like get acquainted with them again.
It serves where the war is the background.
Mm.
It's not the main part of the story. It just happens to be going on during their journey.
With the narrative perspective as well, or with this model of like Dandelion's like, what happened last time? Let's catch it up. Like we have the privilege to put down baptisms of fire and immediately pick up, Tower of Swallows. But for readers who were following this book by book, as if there was like their needed trilogy, there would have been a year. I don't know the timeline of the books published in Polish. I'm very sorry, but it helps serve the readers as well who maybe took a break or are coming back into it as well. For anyone who's like, oh, this is on the just recently published shelf. I don't know that it's, number X in a series. I'll just pick it up and read it. And it's a way of reintroducing it as well across the 3 chapters in a way that gets everyone up to speed as a reminder or as the first time, so that the rest of the story can follow and not be as confusing because of how much we're following.
Well, and Kyle, with your reading journey, you just have Lady of the Lake after this.
I know.
I'm looking at the names of the 3 people who dug up and found.
Oh, yeah, Dandelion.
Zidyub, Billy Goat, and Camille. We never hear about those 3 people again. They're mentioned multiple times in the chapter. They're described. They're given personality. Never again.
But do we know their hair color?
We know their breast size.
They aren't women, so they don't get a ton of detail like that.
Sapkowski. So that is it for our show today. Kyle, Kitty, thank you guys so much for joining us for this episode. Thank you to our Hansa for listening. So where can people find you both? And is there anything that our community can help you with, or anything that you would like to share with them?
Yeah, you can find me on socials at the Kyle Ross. But if you're interested in learning more about the Icarus Writing Collective and what we do in our upcoming issue, which should be November 2025, you can find us on socials at Icarusine on Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, and now TikTok. Or you can visit our website at IcarusWritingCollective.com.
You can find me on the Breakfast in Beauclair Hansa. I tend to jump on at least a couple times a week, and then we also host our book clubs. I hope you'll join me and Softy. Our book clubs are great. We usually discuss 1 chapter at a time, and we look forward to hosting you on there.
Yes, and thank you both. You listeners can join the Hansa Discord to chat further about The Witcher, among other things, such as K-pop demon hunters, apparently, and Critical Role at bit.ly/the Hansa Discord. Next episode, join us as we continue our discussion of Andrzej Sapkowski's Tower of Swallows, Chapter 4. Thanks for joining us at the Breakfast Table. For show notes, transcripts of each episode, and a complete list of our social platforms and listening services, head over to breakfastinbeauclair.com. Breakfast in Beauclair is created by Alyssa from Good Morning. It's hosted by Alyssa. The show is edited by Alyssa and Caleb Byes, with music by Alex Berner. Breakfast in Beauclair is produced by Alyssa in New York City, with Katie the Redhead of Toussaint, Jacob B., Charlotte from Egberg Glamour, the Original Roach, Libby John Verblia, Tom from Australia, Jill Kate the Tabby Witch, Ollie from Sweden, James Carson III, Miriam Tamaria, Softy, Lisa C., and Sidna. Special thanks to Kitty and Kyle for joining us for this episode, and our international Hansa for their support.